Well, good afternoon. Our third and fourth bills are going to be rolling out, Judiciary and Higher Ed. We'll continue to roll out bills and give you a brief explanation in case we continue to go late at night. I don't know if you heard, but I mentioned that we'll be back at about 6:30, which means it'll probably be another late night. So in deference to you all, we wanted to give you some information ahead of time. So with that, we'll start with Senator Limmer and Judiciary and then go to Senator Anderson and Higher Ed.
Well, thank you all for coming. Today, the Minnesota Senate will pass the Judiciary and Public Safety Finance Bill today. It totals $2.385 billion of funds for the Department of Corrections, the Judicial Branch, and a criminal division of the Department of Public Safety. This budget increases spending by close to a little over $38 million. The bill also includes, part of that $38 million is $9.5 million in new funding for correction officers and security upgrades at state prisons and correctional facilities. The bill also allocates $300,000 to additional security grants and updates available for faith-based nonprofit organizations who are at risk of being targeted by violent extremism. This is a proposal that's also been done over the last few years as well. This budget also provides funding to toughen penalties for sex offenders. The bill includes increased sentencing for those who produce or sell child pornography. Additional funding supports the repeal of the marital rape defense. The new language clarifies that despite consent, a police officer may not engage in sexual conduct of any kind with anyone in their custody. And to further protect children from exploitation, a 120-day cooling off period is included that teachers, coaches, and others known as a person in a position of authority may not enter into a relationship with a recent student old enough to consent but not yet 18 years of age. We believe that keeping Minnesotans safe is the most important function of state government. And this bill is focused on funding corrections officers, public safety, employees, and all those who deserve protection from violence and injustice. Do you want to stand for questions
Let's have Senator Anderson, then we can stand for questions.
Thank you very much. Senator Paul Anderson, Chair of the Senate Higher Education Committee. And really proud of the budget we put together. We've got $100 million in new investments into the higher education system and different provisions. First and foremost, we protect students and families from increased costs. We limit tuition increases. We invest in successful programs that meet our workforce needs. We prepare our students for the economy of today and tomorrow, and I'll touch on that in just a moment. But we really encourage public-private partnerships, which is a critical part of this. We increase accountability for our higher education systems. We've got $23.4 million in new money for the state grant program, and that expands eligibility and increased grant amounts. $28 million, just over $28 million to the University of Minnesota, $47 million to MnState, the MnState system. And then I just want to highlight a major piece of the bill, which is $15 million in increased investment in the workforce scholarship program. And this is just really, really critical. When we're talking, I don't know if you in the press and talking with job providers and even employees that are looking for jobs. But we as elected officials, any place you go, you talk about the workforce shortage, 20 to 30% of these in-demand areas. You're talking about manufacturing, IT, healthcare, agriculture, and then this bill actually adds child care and transportation into that. This is a big, big deal. This is a situation where we're really driving new students coming in or career transfers into the two-year system to go after those jobs that are ready and just present themselves with good-paying jobs that are in demand. So with that, I think we'll stand for any questions. Sorry.
What are you doing to keep tuition down? You don't have a tuition freeze, I take it. Explain a little more on that.
Yeah, so Don, we do a 2% cap on both the Minnesota and the Min-State system. This is approximately inflation. So we do recognize we did have a bill that we heard and had extensive conversation in committee this year about a freeze. We recognized we don't want to penalize the system. We understand that there's some inflationary costs, but in this case, we cap them at 2%. The governor does not have a cap, and tuition increases approximately 6.5% to 7%, and the House funds them at a much higher rate. With, we're going to have a conversation on revenue to pay for that, but and then they freeze it with dramatically more revenue.
And other types of expense limits on the two systems?
Sorry.
Are you limiting spending in other areas in the two systems?
We do call for a report on administration costs, a reduction of 10%. This is something that gets a lot of conversation around the Capitol as well. There's been reports the University of Minnesota has between $1 billion and $1.5 billion in administrative costs. We really want to dive into that and understand that better. There's been some attempts in the past, but really that doesn't seem successful. So we really want to understand that better. And then there's other things that we're trying to do. We're trying to also really stick up for the students and families that are paying more for online classes than they are in-person classes. This is a fascinating conversation we've had, but we're calling it the online parity or tuition parity bill. And what it says is online classes can't cost more than tuition can't cost more than in-person classes. And on average, it's between $90 and $170 per class per student. You talk about 10 classes over the course of a year, and just your human nature when technology is driving costs down everywhere else, why is that driving costs up for higher education and being a burden on our students? So we go after that as well.
How much are you funding for the Min-State's Next Generation project that they're doing?
So this is a really important piece. It's $22 million. There's $8 million in base funding. So this is an increase of 22 for a total of 30 million. This is in Min-State's testifying on their full request. This is their #1 priority. You're talking about the whole data infrastructure system that communicates amongst the Min-State system. So you're talking housing, records, everything. And as we know, it's so critical to today's economy, today's business, everything. And it's 20 years old, and it was built in-house, and it needs to be replaced. So we make a heavy investment because this will also reduce costs in the end, improving that system.
And is it a one-time appropriation, or will it continue for the length that they've requested?
This is a one-time, and their full funding request was $37 million.
When will the Senate vote on the marital rate repeal? Is that going to be taken up separately still?
Yes. Glad you asked that question. The funding is included in the finance bill. That's known as Senate File 15. It's carried by Senator Benson, and that'll be coming up in the next few weeks, I suspect, and it's a high priority of our caucus.
So it'll be taken up not
separately. It'll be a standalone. And I might want to add, in comparison to other omnibus judiciary bills in the state capitol, we do not include public policy bills in this omnibus finance bill. I believe in separation of issues. I believe in a one-subject rule as outlined in the state constitution. And individual policy bills will be all considered by the Senate that we've passed out of the Senate Judiciary Committee separately. Our bill is focused exactly on where it should be, and following the title of the bill, it's a finance bill. We do have provisions that cost money, and they are included in this, but standalone bills that do not cost anything will be considered separately.
Are you anticipating the debate this evening on through the amendment process with respect to gun control legislation?
You know, I suppose I anticipate anything and everything, but nevertheless, this bill does not have policy in it outside of that which is included in our budget target. So that would mean that any separate standing policy bill would not be germane to this bill due to the fact that it's a policy-only bill.
Can I ask the similar question of Chair Anderson about policy in your higher ed bill? First, do you have policy bills in there? And secondly, have they all been heard separately? And then thirdly, could we possibly get a list of the bills that have been inserted in this?
Yep, we can certainly provide that for you. We do have some policy bills included in the higher education bill, one of which, or significant portion of that, is the department, the Office of Higher Education's policy. We adopted virtually all of it, so working closely with Commissioner Olson on that, but happy to talk a little bit more. We have a couple different things, some small technical policy changes on a few provisions, but I'm happy to provide that for you.
Let me address the policy or not policy issue. We give the chairs some leeway on which way they want to go. It's been a tradition of the Senate Judiciary Committee not to hear much policy. Even 2 years ago, you would have found the GOP House majority then frustrated that we kept much smaller bills. So that's just, you know, the prerogative of the chair and following what he believes is the right course to go.
You know, the House is taking up HHS today, another, like schools yesterday, another bill where there are vast funding differences and policy differences between the two chambers. Can you just speak to the different approaches and where you see those negotiations going?
So certainly we're far apart, but it's my job to make the case that the resources that we have is what we need to live within. It's a 5% increase, about $2.3 billion more money overall. Theirs requires over 4 years, $12 billion of tax increase. And so that will be all of our great challenge. But I'm going to make the case. My background is sales, so I'm hoping that I can convince the governor and the House that the path we're on is the best path for Minnesota and for the people that end up having to pay the bill, the taxpayers. And so we're already a high tax state, whether we're third or fourth or whatever the number is, we're right in there. And so I'll make the case that we have enough resources if we just use them wisely. But I absolutely am aware that we're quite a bit apart, and that'll be the big challenge, as it always is.
In terms of the provider tax at this point, is that a, you know, you've been opposed to that through the session so far, is that still a firm line there? Are you getting more open to reinsurance for provider tax swap? You know, how is that negotiation going?
It's a firm line, but I will tell you there's lots of issues that we need to get done that I believe will get done. I believe HAVA will get done. I believe reinsurance will get done. I believe the resources that we've provided for deputy registers will get done. There's just quite a few that I'm, you know, for whatever reason, they're just getting dragged into the end. That's not uncommon. I'm actually grateful that we're actually able to pass quite a few bigger, more complicated bills early. It's just that we didn't get all of the ones done that I would have hoped to.
Leader, both of the days you've been back, the governor's gone after you pretty hard. The Senate Republicans, not necessarily you personally. Talk about, have you been talking to him lately? Have you talked to him this week? And how that relation is going as you head into the next few weeks?
The relationship is good with both the governor and the speaker. We communicate regularly. The speaker and I meet at least once a week. We will now invite the governor into those meetings as well. So the communication, which is a really important part of divided government getting to the end, is good. And, you know, we're trying to lay out some markers. I've said that we're not going to do any gas tax, not a penny, no gas tax. He said I'm going to dig my feet in on the provider tax. You know, so we're trying to, you know, give some clues about where we'll be and not be. But, you know, increasing revenue is a direction that Republicans just don't want to do, especially when we're a high tax state. And so, but that is going to be the great struggle. And now we're narrowed into that funnel. And here we go. And by the way, I thought you were retired.
Came out of retirement just to listen to you today.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Someone else has the room at once,
Yeah.
so we have to wrap it up.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you, guys. What are you doing?